Round 5 of the Simufur or Silver Championship. Sorry, I almost said and Championship. We're back into that time of year, but no. Welcome to round 5 as our championship is coming to a head in Valencia, Spain. A famous test track for Formula E, but also a GT track staple since 2021 in the SRO GT series. And here we're going to be seeing a moto track that is going to be adapted a little bit for these GT cars. See a little bit of driving similar to Misano, a lot of tight racing, but we've already seen that the challenging tracks this season have really tested the drivers and produced great battles, with the likes of Suzuka creating one of our best races of the season. So coming in, looking forward to another great round of the season as we take a look in practice following the leading car so far, Oraz in the number 406 BMW, who's leading the pack away as we get ready to start yet another amazing round of this championship.
Yep, the drivers seem to express some sort of, maybe, I think some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? They weren't too sure that this race was going to provide great racing, but I don't know. I think this is going to throw up a really interesting one. There's a lot of good places here where I think you can overtake. You can set up a nice overtake a few corners back. But yeah, I think we're going to see a good one today.
Yeah, I definitely look forward to what we're going to see today. Again, we've already seen some of the technical tracks. Oulton Park also putting on a good race, admittedly with a little bit of help from the wet weather. But it's certainly shown that a lot of these tracks that many people have thought to be maybe a little bit boring or processional even, to create great racing, it's allowed us to really let these silver drivers extend their legs and show their racecraft on tracks that aren't just a simple draft behind someone and get a pass on the straight. You've seen drivers have to work a lot harder. It's produced great racing. We've seen a little bit of contact here and there, and a little bit of door banging as well, but none of these drivers have really stepped too far over the instant. We've had our fair share of drama, but end of the day, it's all GT racing. All is fair in love and war. As we jump on with Suzuka, number 10, who is sporting that beautiful blue E-liveried 296, fresh off the heels of the Nürburgring 24-hour win. Sorry for any spoilers, but current events are current events in the racing world, and they're going to be leading away. As actually they have just been overtaken by Wuschel, who is our reigning race winner 2 times over in the past 2 wet races, Nürburgring GP as well as Oulton Park, both in the wet races dominated by the Porsche, looking to stamp their authority very early on as we start practice. 5 minutes to go, so just a little bit time left to allow these drivers to iron out those last little bit of kinks, get the last little bit of warm-up in before we head into the flat-out qualifying session later on.
Yep, Wuschel, our current championship leader, going by the current standings. I just want to get this out of the way now. There's 14 corners on this racetrack. Only 6 of them have names, apparently, according to the track map I'm looking at. And all the corners that have names start with curva. So they all are called curva. Turn 1, Aspar. Turn 2, Duen. So I'm just going to refer to them all as their secondary name: Aspar, Duen, Nieto. I'm not going to put the curvers in front of them.
I do believe that all the corner names are actually named after famous MotoGP riders. Looking at it, you have Campos, Duen obviously being the father of, is it Jake Duen, if I'm not mistaken, current F2 driver. So, as well as
above my pay grade.
Wow, a little bit of research goes a long way, I'll say that. But definitely, it's a circuit that is purpose-built for MotoGP, and that means a lot of long sweeping corners. Dirty air will play quite a part in many of our battles in these GT3 machines, but we've seen that actually create much better battles, as this perfect example in Suzuka, where we had 3 cars battling for P2. I believe it even boiled down to 4 cars in the last couple minutes, just trying to duke it out for those final podium positions, and what a great race that turned out to be. So looking forward to what we can offer here as we take a look on the driver's eye view for Wushel here, as you see these long sweeping corners, lots of late apexes, late turn, and just try to get the car rotated late into the corner, get that power down very, very early, get that drive out of the corner. So we're going to see a lot of corners favoring the Porsche here, but I don't think this is going to be the dominant car coming into this race.
No, the Ferrari should be pretty much up there. Of course, new track, new cars. The Ferrari is going to be the favored child. But there's something else I want to put out there. I'm going to call this a Moto GT track because it's a Moto track and a GT track, so we'll just call it a Moto GT.
I can't argue with that too much for certain, but I'm gonna stick with my MotoGP. The corner names are gonna back me up on that. A little bit of confirmation bias, so you can't tell me I'm wrong as we see randomly popping into the top of the leaderboard with a 132.5, putting themselves a further 2/10 clear of the field as we see Wushel trying to sneak in a faster lap, unable to get an improvement there. And I believe this is going to be all of our drivers heading into their final flying lap of practice. So if you haven't gotten comfortable yet, this is your last chance to do so. Spend a little bit of extra time just opening up those shoulders, getting a little bit loose in the car, feeling how things are going, and just try to connect with it that last little bit, because it's time for the setup changes to stop, and it's time to really iron or focus up, get yourself locked into the car. Make sure all your brake markers are in check because the meaningful sessions are just about to start.
Yep, I think we're going to see a lot of track limits violations in qualifying and in the race. Qualifying, of course, you just lose your lap. In the race, you could end up with a drive-through penalty. There's a lot of runoff you can use, and that can trip you up when it comes to the parts you can't use.
Yeah, very much so. Especially this corner right here, the second to last real corner. I believe that is turn 12. Yes, so turn 12, very tricky corner, very easy to wash yourself too wide there, and that's serrated exit curbing. Very, very dangerous for these GT3 machines if you're running it extremely low, as well as the apex curbing of turn 12. Very, very dangerous if you hit that, as it's going to eject your car into that gravel trap on the inside, and I can assure you that that is not the fastest line through that corner. That gravel will catch that car extremely quickly and ruin your day of any hopes of gaining positions through that rest of that long turn 13.
Yep, I think there's a certain point in the curbs there where you can't use anymore. You can use a certain amount, and after that the car starts getting really unsettled. The Porsche could see a big slip up here if it does take a bit too much curb, but I think that the Ferrari might handle it well.
Yeah, it will certainly be a track of commitment, to say the least. There's not many of these corners where you just kind of fire and forget, for lack of a better term, where you just turn it into the corner and just it makes it. A lot of mid-corner manipulation, trying to balance that car on the throttle. Make sure you're not sliding a little bit too much. One thing to know with these long corners, you can't really throw the car in and plant the throttle, hope to get a good drive out, as you see Randomly going for a stop there right on the exit of the long lap penalty. I'm not familiar actually where that is on track. I believe it might be the hairpin of turn 11. But we're going to see ourselves transition over to qualifying here, as these drivers are going to get ready to set their cars up, take that fuel out of their machines, see what they can do on maximum trim. And it is going to be the number 406 of Juarez getting out on track first. You can identify with that bright metallic blue and white livery, followed up by, I believe, by Denak in the number 54. It could be Anka. Not getting close enough to look. I believe that is Denak with the orange wing mirrors. So going to see these lead two cars trying to get out and set a time. Looks like Juarez letting the number 54 of Denak go. Maybe just trying to follow suit, knowing that Denak has been a championship contender, but has fallen out of favor in the last couple of races with a bit of incidents, mistakes, getting caught up over the TGR driver. Not the most fruitful last couple of rounds.
Yeah, seemed to really struggle in the wet conditions of Oulton Park and the Nürburgring. So yeah, definitely hoping for better this time around. Maybe try and wrestle that championship stranglehold that Michelle has in P1 in the Porsche. Porsche at the moment not looking too competitive compared to the Ferraris here. So yeah, that's definitely something that's going to play in Denak's favor today.
Absolutely, but the first thing coming out on track is going to be Denak's first flying lap as we take it on board with the number 54 flying down the main straight. A very, very long drive down into turn one, Aspar corner, as you're going to get onto the brakes, down one gear, quickly back up onto that throttle. Let the car track on out. Little bit of curve to be used by Denak, and then deep into turn two, do and quarter as you try to aim for that late apex, but struggle with throttle at the same time too, just trying to squeeze the car out. Tip it through turn three, not really a corner, but you want to set yourself up for four, don't unbalance the car, and then immediately you're going to set yourself up for turn five. Early in, but light pressure dragging that nose through the corner, then into Angel Nieto, or Angel Nieto. I'm sorry if I am mispronouncing in any way. Another traction limited corner, very easy to spin up the rear tires through there, through the left-hander, turn 7, immediately into a hard, long left-hander of turn 8, trying to loop the car back around. You don't want to get inside too early, otherwise you're going to be struggling with keeping that speed up. Then the quick left-right of 9 and 10, hard onto the brakes to the slowest part of the circuit of turn 11. Very late apex on the hairpin, and then down what is going to be their second longest straight to turn 12. The very dangerous apex curb in the inside. Careful of washing out too wide on the outside. That curbing as well, ready to unsettle the car at any moment. The long left to 13 is really messing up your braking as you try to set the car up for Adrian Campos. Turn 14, which very, very tricky corner to get right, multiple lines through there, but able to squeeze that throttle nice as Denak as we run down the main straight for the first time, a 132.4, the benchmark to beat.
Yep, they maybe left a little bit of time on the table in the turn one. You can take a way more curb than that. You can pretty much run all the way out to the green and use every last inch. Yeah, only times on the board so far: Danak in P1, Wishel in P2, and Luna in P3. As we see Randome taking P4 in the Ferrari and Aras in P5 in the BMW. So yep, decent spread at the moment. But we've got a Ferrari, Porsche, Ferrari top four.
Yeah, it's going to be maybe seeing a little bit of those track limits coming to play. We talked about how this is going to be a pretty brutal track for track limits. Exit of turn 2, the most notable one for me. Very, very easy to just push the car wide through there and make an invalid lap out of something that would have felt very good. And then after that, it's quite a long lap that you have to just sit there and wait. 1 minute 30, it's not the shortest lap. It's not the longest either, but when you're trying to make the most of those tires, and especially with these tires at 1.9, which do seem to be a little bit more temperature sensitive, it can be very, very frustrating if you throw away that one lap where they're perfectly in the window, are unable to maximize what you think could have been a better qualifying effort. So you jump on board with Bushel here, taking quite a bit of entry curb on that apex, but the car staying very, very tight through turn 13 as we see Denak go for an improvement, but it could be Bushel trying to improve once more, tipping it into the final corner. The Porsche using all of that rear weight on that rear engine profile to put that power down. Not a single bit of movement as we cross the line. It's going to be a new fastest lap for Bushel at a 132.1. So already moving themselves 2/10 clear of the TGR driver and one of their championship rivals in Denak, who's going to be trying to look for some kind of rebuttal through the 4-5 complex. It looks like the car's going to be decently settled, but I think a little bit of understeer pushing that number 54 wide.
Yeah, I would like to retract my previous statement of the Porsche not being very strong here. It does seem to be that is the case. As we see Denak currently 2/10 up on his time, so he's going to close the gap to Bushel. Maybe even overtake. He gained a couple of tenths there actually for a nice little time, but loses it again on exit as he just went a little bit too deep on the brakes there.
Yeah, it's a very tricky track. We talked about very on edge in terms of absolutely maximizing the limit, but it seems very well put together. That front end biting nicely into turn 11 as we set up the quick run into 12. Careful taking too much curb, but actually maybe a little bit conservative if we go a little bit wide. A bump over that serrated curb, that rear left dropping and bouncing the car about. It's nonetheless not an issue taking all of the entry curb, maybe almost a little bit too wide on the exit of 14. but Denak is going to be making that run to the line, and it is going to be an improvement, but only by a tenth. So Wushel continuing to hold that provisional pole as we enter the 13 minutes remaining in this qualifying session.
Yep, Danak definitely has a couple of tenths in him. Probably about 3, maybe 4 tenths left on track for him. As you see, Suzuki then jumps up into third as well with a nice lap. Slight improvement as Randomi then takes second spot with 500s away from Wushel's time. So yeah, Ferrari's definitely biting on the heels of Wushel here in the Porsche.
And certainly not going to be an easy one, as it does actually look like I'd have to argue that the Porsche and Ferrari are quite evenly matched. I mean, we see the Ferrari maybe being a little bit easier to achieve that time, as they are 4 of the top 5 cars, excluding one and only pole position held by Wushel. So this could be quite a tense battle, as we see Suzuki using all of that exit curbing through turn 1, absolutely wringing the neck of the car, and through turn 2, just barely holding it in there. The edge of the curbing there, the very edge of your track limit, so you need to keep a tire inside as we tip ourselves into 4. Again, once again, using all that curb, tipping it in once more to 5. Decent compliance from the Ferrari, and again, using all of that track. So the number 10 on for a decent lap here, being able to put together at least all of the track limits, but maybe a little weak on our exit there. The car not tracking all the ways out on the exit of the corner there in turn 6, and that's going to hurt them on the run at 2.8. But we see Denak now with the first 131 of the session. Wow. Suzuki's trying to just tip to go together through this quick left-right chicane, and then very, very early into that hairpin. That's going to cost them a little bit on exit. You could see them pick up a wash of understeer and struggle to the outside there. So this Ferrari maybe having a little bit of compliance issues as we're trying to get in early and wait for that car to rotate. But nonetheless, one more corner to navigate for the number 10 through turn 14, early on throttle, and just keeping it in, squeezing it inside of those track limits. Shortest run down the main straight. And will it be an improvement? No, it will not for the number 10 Bluey Ferrari.
Yep, it's a really interesting track list. You have the turn 1, which is going to favour the Ferrari, a nice high downforce corner. Turn 2 is a slow hairpin, that's going to favour the Porsche. Turn 3 after that is a medium speed, it's going to favour the Ferrari again. Into a slower kind of turn 4. Again, the Porsche is going to have a nice punch out of that corner. Into a medium speed of 5. Again, the Ferrari is going to excel there. Into turn 6, another Ferrari corner, and turn 7. Into a slower left-hander that's going to favour the Porsche. So it's a lot of to and fro, and I think on this track, no car I think is going to have the upper hand.
No, not at all. I mean, talked about the fact that the dirty air will play a nice part in here. I think that will actually end up making the Porsche shuffle down the order a little bit. So it'd be very, very important for Wushel to try to sneak this pole position away from the rest of the group, as they're going to be maybe a little bit more front limited throughout the rest of the circuit, as we see Luna on an improvement of about 5 tenths so far. This could be a massive step up the orders. So far, they'd be putting themselves in P5, and I'm sure with plenty more room to gain in that Porsche, we go a little bit narrow coming into the turn 8 complex, but this Porsche really trying to stamp that mid-corner rotation, use that rear engine weight bias that comes as a benefit from that engine being mounted over that rear axle. And once again, that Porsche looking very, very compliant through turn 12. Doesn't look like there's much of a struggle for either of our Porsche drivers here to get it into 12, and just keeps rotating, even though that track starts to fall off camber. And I think that would be a really big part of fighting in traffic for these two Stuttgart-based machines.
Yep, absolutely. So we're just looking at the times here. No massive improvements to really look at. Suzuka is maybe a tenth up on their time, but not going to trouble the top 4 there. We do look back at Luna losing a little bit of time here. Again, no, not too much to look at. Suzuka's the only one really kind of gaining a little bit of time, but other than that, nothing to shout home about.
Yeah, it's going to be... It is a really tricky track. I've found in my time trials that I've run here, in my practice and testing, that it is one of those tracks where I mean, when you nail it perfect, you absolutely know it, but you only really nail some perfect corners maybe once in every 5 attempts of asking, and that can be very, very tricky when trying to string together a qualifying lap if maybe you can only piece together 2 or 3 of those corners where you really get that rotation right, you really keep that speed very high through the mid corner, and that can really be frustrating when you're trying to put down one of these qualifying laps and you start seeing the fact that you're losing time, and all of a sudden maybe you have one corner where you gain 2 tenths or so by just really nailing that rotation, but then you just can't get that last half a tenth, that last tenth or so to just make an improvement. So you start kind of fighting between the cars, start trying to force it to do a little bit more, and then once you start doing that, you enter this downward spiral where you aren't really getting much more of the car. You start over driving it a little bit as we see Suzuka using all of the track limits. They're surprised we weren't seeing it in a validation, but definitely riding that limit, the very, very fine line for the number 10. It's certainly comfortable with the limits that they are riding as we've seen them pushing them so often in this qualifying so far.
Yep, as I said, you can use it, all the green and then some in turn one, so there's no issues there. I think it's actually turn 3 is probably going to be, the exit of turn 2 into turn 3. I think that's going to be the corner that gets everyone with track limits. It's really deceptive how far you can run wide, and you just a centimeter too far, and you're into a warning out of nowhere.
Yeah, and that curb always feels wider than it actually is, and of course, any wiggle pushing you out further is going to be very detrimental to your lap. Suzuka really pushing through the hairpin here, as well as Anka on a big improvement, 2 tenths so far. Already trying to push in, maybe sneak into the podium positions as we have the final sector still yet to go as they're up by 3 tenths. Now getting it into 12. We've seen the Ferrari struggle here, but good compliance from the 7th place Ferrari here. Then keep it tight through 13. Try to set up, spot your brake marker nice and early. Set it up early for 14. Really want to focus on that power, squeezing it down nice and early. Very, very good compliance from that pink liveried TGR car. And is it going to be an improvement enough to push them far up the grid? It is an improvement, and they miss out by 0.03 of a second, but it is currently a TGR lockout with a 9.22. Followed up by Anka's with 9.57. So 0.03 of a second separating these drivers with 6 minutes left to go. And if you're Anka right now, are you thinking about tires? Or are you trying to push on and get another fast lap on that tire after you just squeezed out what might have seemed like everything? Oh, and a big wobble outside of 5.
I was going to say I would probably be staying out, but after that wobble, it's probably get the tires on it and get the pressures adjusted. But I think Danak needs Anka to play a little bit of rear gunning here today to try and keep Wushel at least from the start of the race. That Porsche is going to be mega, and he needs that 1 car buffer that Anka's going to provide to try and keep Wushel behind him today.
That will be playing a very big part, but we've also seen how punchy Wushel can be off the starts. And think back to Donington, I believe they gained 3 positions off of the start in that first lap with no incident. So we definitely could benefit from Anka being up there. But at the same time, at what point does Anka's championship come into play here? As Anka's been relatively consistent, maybe a little bit further down, but I mean, looking at the standings here, they're separated by only 6 points. That's easily a 1-race swing. Is a little bit wide there. That's certainly going to be an invalidation for Anka, and possibly where you might want to see a new set of tires. But no, they're going to carry on. So no harm, no foul. Yeah, 6 points. And is Anka gonna fold to rear gun here, or is Anka gonna start fighting for their own championship? 2 rounds left. I mean, that's no small gap. The next driver up from Denak, I mean, that's 8 points, and also further another 12 points separated from P1. So it is still a sizable but not insurmountable gap between the two of them. But at what point do they start fighting for P3 and only P3?
Yeah, I didn't actually realize it was only 6 points between them. So yeah, maybe Anka doesn't want to play rear gunner today. Maybe he wants to look after his own championship. But they're both going to have to look behind him for Wushel to come up in that Porsche.
And we see right across the board, aside from MNU underscore, I believe is just starting through their lap. But track maybe falling out of favor. Not sure time of day 2. confidently, but maybe we'll see a last-second improvement in track condition. Track condition currently stating that it is fast as we sit on a nice, cool 21 day. So 21 air temperature, 21 track. So none of these drivers really going to be dealing with tire struggles unless they're struggling to get them up to temperature, but qualifying, it's still a very tricky thing in 1.9. Again, this tire temperature is extremely important. It does feel like you only get 1 or 2 flying laps. As we see Anka now starting their 3rd consecutive flying lap as we've been around with them trying to squeeze what little bit of life is left in those tires. And it looks like maybe a little bit coming through 1 as they're already looking for an improvement as they tip themselves deep in the brakes on the 2, really squeezing that power on. And it is going to be a slight improvement so far. So keeping on with Anka here, this could be a challenge for our pole here. Ferrari already proving to be very, very strong in Valencia. Now Anka just needing to have that inter-team battle dealt with to try to take that pole position away from their teammate. You see both just flirting with the edge of improvement and not improving. 0.0 on both drivers. So this, I think it's really just going to be a case of who just gets that one corner, that one extra corner where they get a little bit of extra rotation, a little bit of extra time, and who's going to get it at the best time of the session. Because all we know, this could go optimal in the last 2. Oh, big slide from the curb on the inside for Anka. That's going to be their lap done, but well held from the TGR driver. That could easily have been another set of tires and into the pits with them.
I actually just, I was looking at the times rather than the screen, and I actually saw him gain like 0.4 of a second, and then you said he went wide, so I'll explain that one. Danak was on for a bit of improvement there. Seems to be kind of matching his current fastest lap, but not too much of an improvement to come from there.
No, not much at all, but regardless of where we're at, the TGR drivers could be quite happy with their qualifying. Denak looking to squeeze that extra 10th out that it looks like the rest of the field might be lacking here. So as we roll through turn 12, another 10th gain, so perhaps a little bit more confidence through that complex, holding now very, very tight through it's very, very wide, sorry, through 13. Really trying to straighten out that braking for 14 early on power, and a very big gain on the exit there. Could it be a little bit too hard on entry? No, it does not look like they're hemorrhaging that time. So it is going to be a big improvement of 131.555 for the leading TGR driver. That was not an improvement on track conditions. That was purely a difference in pace that Denak was able to squeeze out of the car. And at what better time? With 1 minute left in qualifying, all of these drivers are either on or about to start their final flying lap. So we get on board with Wushel here, just trying to squeeze in one more fast lap. Looks like they'll make it back in time for one more, but you know, you'd have to imagine while we haven't been paying attention to them. I'm not sure how old those tires are. If those are brand new tires, we might be looking at a car that might only kick in at the start or at the middle of the portion of the lap. Once it gets up to optimal pressures, optimal temperatures. We'll have to keep on board here. Keep close eye on Wushel as well as Randomy just up the road. He's going to be feeding draft to that 992 Porsche. Actually, I believe that's MNU underscore, not Randomy. Regardless, feeding in that little bit of extra draft to the 992, taking all of that curb. Wushel leaving no stone unturned on the exit of turn 1's curbing. Very deep into 2, just trying to maintain that speed, and it looks like a little bit slow on entry. You can see that car didn't want to wash all the ways out, losing a little bit of speed. This Porsche just trying to manipulate all the rest of the track, tipping it in, and overall the car doesn't look very limited here. We aren't seeing very many mistakes, but maybe just leaving a tiny bit of time on the table, a tiny bit of track limits that could be exploited a little bit more. Entry of 6 there. Had a little bit of room to be desired, but got a good run down to 7 and 8. Unable to convert much time. Very, very tight in, and a little bit of a wiggle there. Maybe benefiting that Porsche just being able to keep that power down, but you have to imagine you're running out of time here. Really need to squeeze that throttle, and a little bit of slide again coming out of the hairpin. Could be by design if you can carry that momentum. It's not very harmful in the Porsche. And then all the curb on the inside of 12, and that's what we were talking about. That's the exact curb. And we said it can bite you if you take too much, and Wushel unfortunately suffering the wrath of that inside sausage curb. And I can't imagine that's going to be the first time that we're going to see a car getting bounced out wide and back to that outside gravel trap of 13 just from a simple bit of greed on that inside curve, to be honest.
Yep. Excuse me. Yeah, as you were saying there, yep, definitely got caught out by the curb. They'll have to play a little bit safer when it comes to the race, as that's obviously where you score all your points. But yeah, as you see, Suzuka the only one left on track to place a lap time. A couple of tenths up actually, so they're going to jump maybe up into third place here. Actually, they do. They get second place off. They strip it off Anga.
And just sneaking in a lap right at the end there. That's going to be a nice improvement for Suzuka. They're going to be very, very happy with that. But, oh my, quite a ominous result for qualifying as Denak leads by 0.4 of a second. We talked about how that very well might be just hooking together that 1 or 2 extra corners where you really, really nail that rotation perfectly. But it's a quite threatening gap as you see Denak take that pole position. Suzuka just last second breaking up that TGR front row lockout by only 0.03 of a second, pushing Anka down into P3, followed up with Bushel sealing out P4 and Randomly locking out that top 5. But I mean, all in all, Ferrari really dominating that top 5. 4 out of 5 cars, and actually even then, 5 out of the top 7. The only other cars keeping them company being the Porsches, the 992 recently added with this 1.9 update. So this could be a rather interesting race. Again, we talked about the ebb and flow. Porsche's really good in the mid corner here, but those Ferraris, they seem to be really good at getting the front end of the car into the corner, really good at trying to squeeze through the understeer that you might get on entry with these long late rotation corners, late apexes. So be very, very interesting to see. Maybe some aggressive moves coming in from the Porsches, some very racy attitudes in the first couple of laps when everyone's stacked up together.
Yep, and we have the front row is our battle from Suzuka commenced. So we're going to see these two. I think we're going to see Suzuka be very aggressive at the start and try and take that position off Denak. Denak's going to want to try and make amends for the couple of punts that he gave Suzuka the other time in Suzuka. That little tongue twister there, Suzuka in Suzuka.
It's certainly going to be a little bit of a revenge of the 10th. It doesn't have the same roll of the tongue, but revenge of the Ferrari, the prancing horse, trying to prove that that position was rightfully theirs back in Suzuka. And we're going to probably see a bit of a spicy battle coming into turn 1 here. We're noting, though, that Porsche right behind Suzuka in P4 likely going to be very, very strong off the start. As we roll in here, the Ferraris bi-turbo cars coming in. They're going to be struggling to get the car spooled up initially in that start, yet that naturally aspirated flat 6 coming out of the Porsches instantly able to put that power down. So yeah, it's something very interesting coming into turn 1 here. Perhaps maybe someone trying to stick it around the outside, or maybe even sneaking up to the inside if cars fan out a certain way. It is a relatively long run into turn 1, so plenty of opportunity to build that speed up and get an opportunity to jump to the inside or outside of someone that's not paying attention.
Yeah, lap goes green really early, so they're going to have to be on those turbos in the Ferrari to try and stop that Porsche coming through. I think if the Porsche of Bushell does come through, that's going to throw a big spanner in the works to whoever they get in front of in the top 3, because that just doesn't seem to have the pace the Ferrari does around here. There's not much in it, but I think if the Porsche does get ahead of the Ferraris, that'll throw a spanner in the works for sure.
Absolutely. As we take a look at our starting grid while these drivers prepare their cars. Number 54 of TGR, Tig Gang Racing, taking that pole position. I believe the second or third pole position for, the second pole position for that team. First for Denak in this season, able to take that pole position, but then we take a look back. The number 10, Suzuka, able to sneak into that P2 position and moving that TGR lockout, preventing it from happening for the second time in the season, as we saw Anka back in round 1 take that P1 position. Well, speaking of Anka, down in P3, they're going to fill out that second role, taking that inside line directly behind their teammate, perhaps trying to file in. You got 2 left-handers. Look for them to be trying to make a move, take that second spot back on the first lap of the race. And as well, another hard hard charger. It's going to be Wushel running up. We've seen them take multiple positions off the start before, and that Porsche looking poised to be very dominant right off the green when we roll through. And then going back once more, randomly, P5 able to sneak that Ferrari in with the rest of the crowd, you must say, as we're in good company. Many prancing horses around them, as they're going to be trying to hang on to that inside line, maybe trying to shuffle up a couple positions as well with that inside, as well as the line of Ferraris ahead of them. But sharing that third row with them, Luna, the number 8, they're going to be falling through. They're going to see Porsche versus Ferrari. The classic battles we saw at the end of the GTE days in WEC, well, it has come over to GT3. So look for a little bit of teamwork of the German brands, trying to have a little bit of a war with the Italians all around them. But jumping back to row 4, Slow Circle able to slot into P7, number 58 with that beautiful floral and blue livery, able to steal that 7th position. I believe the tail end of the lead Ferrari group. They're going to be sharing with Captain Consistency, newbie in 17th place, able to take that P8. We're going to be looking for a hard charge from them. 2nd place in all races except for last week when they had an unfortunate disconnect as well as a little bit of turmoil in the first couple laps. So going to be looking for them throughout the rest of this race. Ores taking P9, the number 406. We saw them lead out in practice. Well, unfortunately, weren't able to sneak it as far up the grid as we rolled out. But MNU underscore, the final Ferrari in the group, 2nd car on that 5th row, able to stick it into P10. Maybe not the happiest position, but they still got a lot of work to do, a long race ahead. Blade Wolf, only Aston Martin on the grid, paired up with the Lexus, the number 38 of Dipping Sauce beside them. And they're going to be looking for the hard chargers. They got nothing to lose, so definitely want to keep an eye on them, as they might be looking to take advantage of any incidents that occur during this race, perhaps even play a little bit of some strategy games as we progress through. Don't count them out. That Aston very, very good in race trim, as we've seen before. One thing I want to post up as we roll through here, big question mark for me is going to be, when do you do what? It sounds simple, but pit strategy, I think, going to be playing a big part here as we go through, like Suzuka. How early do you pit and possibly sacrifice that mid-corner grip of the tires? And additionally, when do you decide that, okay, it's time to make a move? Especially this lap 1, I think that's going to be an important question for a lot of these drivers as they try to plan things out. There's a lot of multi-directional corners, so if you get to someone to your inside for 2 corners, 3 corners, they might be to your inside, to that outside. So how long do you want to be patient, maybe risk staying on that inside line and be stacked up, and who's going to be that driver that takes that risk on the outside? A lot of sweeping corners here, a lot of chance for those stack ups. That's going to be a test of the brave and the bold coming through these first 2 or 3 laps here. We take a look at the parade lap of the rest of these machines, just trying to trot through 9 and 10. Well, that's going to be the last time that they roll through here slow as we get ready to roll.
Yeah, I don't think, judge the nature of this track, the way that some of the corners open into the braking zone, I don't think you can afford to sit back and wait. I think you have to go for it, and you have to, put yourself in a position where no one can overtake you, as well as having to try and attack someone who does let that door open. So, there's, I think it's turn 3, maybe it opens a little bit on the entry. Turn 7, I think it is, it opens another bit of entry. You see, there's nothing. I don't think there's anywhere you can really afford to just sit back and let the race unfold in front of you. You have to be on it the whole hour long.
And speaking of on it, we have now moved onto that main straight. All of these drivers 2 by 2 line up and stack up. As these drivers file in, we're going to be rolling up to 70 kilometers an hour. The drivers are rolling in, staring up at those red lights, waiting for them to turn green. As we roll past the starter station and the green flag is out, you see it flying on the right-hand side. It looks like Dedak getting a good start, but there's the hard charge from Wushel. We talked about them early. 3 wide in the turn 1 as you see Suzuka taking that inside in the 1, but Wushel trying to hang it around the outside. Luna also trying to make a move, going a little bit wide, but Wushel once again trying to get nose around the outside into turn 2. A little bit of understeer. They're now forced to file back in line as we see a little bit of movement back in the rest of the grid, trying to sort each other out in a tap. We saw Newbie starting to go around there. Unsure what happened to them. Looks like they are able to collect it as we see Oraz as well going side by side in dipping sauce up 3 positions from the start of the race. And we're only through turn 5. Newbie able to recover that well after that big tap in turn 3. But once again, these drivers starting to get their elbows out right off of the start, and we are not done with the battles yet. So we see Oraz still trying to just hang on to another position, fighting that Aston Martin of Blade Wolf. MNU able to shut the door in front of them, and Blade just trying to keep that grip around the outside of 8 as we tip through 9 and 10. They're going to be once again single filed. Looks like the door might not be open, and yes, Blade having to sit behind. Like we see Oraz getting a wash of understeer, and Blade saying needing no second invitation and into the tricky corner of 12. One of these cars needs to lift, but both are going to stay committed. Oraz on that outside, a little bit of curb. Now Blade has that momentum around the outside of 13, just trying to hang it in tight, and it looks like the momentum is going to go in favor of the Aston Martin. And well behaved from all of our drivers. A little bit of bish and bosh, but they're able to keep it straight. No one out of this race yet, but the battles are continuing back in the grid as we see Wushel trying to hang on to that P3 and Anka trying to make a statement up that grid, having dropped 1 spot with that bi-turbo, just struggling to get spooled up, you have to say, and Wushel getting such an amazing bounce off that line.
Yep, absolutely. It's a perfect start from Wushel. It's probably the most you could have hoped for was an extra place gained. But I wanted to comment on the kind of the grunt on the BMW there between that turn and the Curvac Champi Heroes. I'm probably spelling that or pronouncing that wrong, but the grunt that the BMW had over the Aston Martin there was quite astonishing.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you have to imagine a big part of that would have been from the momentum from the previous corners, but nonetheless, it's definitely gonna give a little bit of a precursor for the start of this race. So it was only lap 1, but this is where you need to learn where the bop is favoring your car. This is the first time most of these drivers are gonna be nose to tail with the cars around them. You don't see it often in practice. So a lot of these drivers starting to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the cars around them, but it looks like the Ferrari is carrying a lot of strength as we see Denak and Suzuka holding on to P1 and 2, already separating from Wushel down in that P3. But we see Sergel just trying to hang on around the outside of 13 and randomly on that inside, but we could see a cutback. The momentum is very important on the long straight here. This could leave you susceptible to turn 1. It looks like Sergel maybe trying to take half a look, but deciding against it, trying to get a little bit more of that slipstream, and that inside of 1 turns into the inside of 2. So you better be committed through here as Randomy's trying to carry that momentum. And it looks like Sergel's just able to kind of shoulder them off a little bit, but that opens the door for Newbie, the number 17, or Captain Consistent, trying to get back up the order and try to fight for another P2 as Randomy's going to lose 2 spots in 2 corners, just being a little bit too conservative on making it through this race. And we saw them start in P5. Well, in 2 laps, they're already down to P7, and they're under attack from the rest of that grid behind them. The Newbie up 1 position, they could be setting their sights on the rest of the grid. That BMW proving to be very strong in race trim. Well, might be looking at another hard charge once again.
Yep. So much for the doubters saying this is going to be a boring race. This is already only on lap 2, and we've already got quite a number of races going on between the guys. As we see, Wushel is maybe just starting to bind up Anka a little bit here. Anka obviously wants to get past, but you know that's the cork in the bottle that's going to have to pop sometime soon.
Certainly, but that Porsche tends to struggle with getting the front tire heat up, especially when you're only taking about an hour's worth of fuel load. That's not a lot of weight over the front end. Fuel tank, of course, on the front axle of that car, unlike the majority of our other cars, where you'll see the fuel tank will be normally sitting around the rear end of the car, especially with the front engine vehicles. So you have that weight from the engine pushing the front tires into the ground. Well, the Porsche doesn't have that benefit. You only have the weight of what's in that fuel tank, and that can be quite detrimental if you don't have the tires in the right window. And maybe we're seeing exactly that. Wushel just not carrying the front grip that they want to into the corner, and it could be costing them a little bit early on. But we've also seen that Porsche very, very strong throughout the midsection of the race. Very good on its tires and keeping it in a good window once you're there. It just takes a lot of work to try to get into that window initially.
Yep, definitely something we have experience with. as of today, the Monza endurance race we had for Simufur. But anyway, we're not talking about that. We're talking about this race. What does Anka do here? Do they try and send it, or they just try and kind of put Wishel on the wrong lines and kind of try and force a mistake?
I mean, I think right now the first thing is get within 2-3 tenths of a second, really start putting that pressure on rather than just filling their mirrors from a distance. You need to really get up on them to the point that even if they're trying to look down the road, they're going to see that glint of the headlights just peering through their rear view mirror. Wishel, one of our VR drivers, certainly going to be able to see that as they look towards the apex, and it's going to be very, very easy to notice that Ferrari filling up those wing mirrors, filling up that rear view mirror even, if you're pressuring right underneath their rear wing. So first step, really get up close, but once you're there, you got to be taking half looks, maybe just half a look before a braking zone. Make them think twice about going hard underneath the brakes and committing to that corner, maybe thinking that you're going to go for a dive. Start playing a little bit of mind games. This is definitely a part of the race where you don't want to full commit to a dive and maybe damage the car. And you know the driver up front's thinking the similar situation as well. They don't want to be taken out so early on, only 7 minutes into a 1-hour sprint race. So start playing with them. Use that to your advantage. They don't want to get in contact. Maybe you try to start moving around. Go for an undercut after you move them wide of a corner and start setting up some runs. But again, first order of business, get right underneath that rear wing. Start trying to pressure some mistakes, and then you can start positioning their car with your own. Yeah, so it looks like Anka might actually already be doing exactly that. As we roll through turn 8, Anka's already pushed up 3/10 of a second. Gap very, very small between the two drivers. We look through the driver's eye view of Anka helmet cam. We're gonna see where the advantages and the disadvantages of these two cars are. You're gonna see ebb and flow it, and you're gonna see that push getting good mid-corner rotation through turn 12 there, all the way rotating down turn 13 and into turn 14. This is where the Ferrari really strives, getting a little bit better under the brakes. Of course, able to put the power down. And as we get down this main straight, you're going to see that Ferrari creep in a little bit more, a little bit better on that straight line compared to the Porsche. The turbo working very, very well for the Ferrari, and not going to be enough to close up the gap. Stretched out to about 0.6 of a second, maybe a small mistake coming in from Anka, and unable to close that gap for the straightaway once again.
Yep, just saw in the background there, Luna going a little bit wide in turn 1, so could pick up a track limit warning there. We saw a few laps ago as well. I think it was Vidumi and Sergel both going wide at turn 3 as well. So yep, definitely something the guys are going to have to look out for. We're still quite early in this race, and we might already be tracking up the track limits.
Absolutely, as we see Anka pushing right underneath that rear wing of Wishel. This could be the moment where Anka looks to send a move there, and we see half a look on the inside, and maybe a little bit of movement under braking. I'm unsure what happened there, but that's Anka right into the back of the 992 of Wishel. Only a couple positions lost for the number 69 Porsche. Oh, but that looks like certainly a lot of damage. That was a big wiggle coming in from Wishel, and that could be a big aero loss coming in from the number 69. Denak, he might not want to wish it, but that could be exactly what Denak needed to start pushing a championship challenge back on, as Wishel being our championship leader. A little bit of bad luck goes a long way in this championship, basically a sprint championship, and all the ways down into P5, and that damage is certainly going to be nothing small, as we saw that big wiggle coming through turn 8, unable to put that power down.
Yep, P5 not the worst in the world, of course, but yeah, that's obviously not what you want. You don't want to lose 3 positions, or 2 positions. Technically, they've only lost. But yeah, the diffuser definitely carrying some damage there. That's going to hurt the balance of the car and make it a little bit nervous into the corners.
Yeah, so taking a second to look at this, it looks like Anka was getting way underneath.
Really good run.
Yeah, coming through turn 6, and then the 7, just trying to set a move up. It looks like Anka kind of diving in as Wishel tried to commit to the corner, and I thought it was movement.
Points.
I'd have to agree. I thought it was maybe a movement under braking at first, but looks like Wishel might have been able to, or was just tipping it into the corner, and Anka just too hot, unable to get the front end of the car into the corner, and now it's damage limitation, to say the least, to just try to maybe be that cork in the bottle, be very defensive, because you know you're not going to make a charge up to the cars ahead with the damage on the rear end. You'd have to imagine at least moderate damage. That was quite a heavy hit to the back of that 992, and now randomly putting on tons of pressure, loading that up to the white, pink, and black Porsche. And first thoughts coming from Wuschel here, I'd have to imagine defending, but anything else that you could supplement coming in from experience here, just how to limit this racing. Salvage maybe a little bit of points for the championship.
Yep, the car actually doesn't look too bad. It doesn't seem to be moving around too much. Maybe it was just a little bit of dirt on the tires after going off. But yeah, obviously you can see the damage on the diffuser there. Do you fix that depending on how many seconds it's going to be worth in the pit stop? If it's 3 seconds, take it. If it's going to be 15, I'd probably leave it, to be honest. If the car's driving okay, it's not going to be worth losing those positions. But we do see there a little bit of washout from Wuschel into turn 1 as Radomi goes for a move. Bit opportunistic to go around the outside, but worth a go anyway. And yeah, Wuschel under pressure now.
Yeah, it's just starting to be that cork in the bottle, like we just talked about, being a little bit defensive. And it looks like maybe the overall downforce of that car is taking a hit. Maybe not a major balance change for the cars. It looks like it's mostly in the control. See some battle scars on the 992's rear wing there. Just peering over, you can see how much stronger the Ferrari is under the brakes there, possibly attributing to that damage that we saw coming in here in turn 8 with 2 laps ago, as Randomy's really trying to squeeze it on. A little bit of a wiggle there, just losing traction for a moment. That's going to give Wuschel some breathing space as we come into the hairpin. Look how much that Ferrari closes up every single braking zone, and you'd have to imagine the new braking king now for 1.9, because every single corner they're closing up not just the speed difference, but yet a further car length and a half every single braking zone, as we see Randomy taking a half a look on the inside of 14, thinking better of it, but Wuschel wide. These are the mind games we talked about, and now it's a drag race down the main straight as we see the flat 6 just trying to push that Porsche down the main straight. Randomly filing back in, trying to take that slipstream and get to the inside of 1, and it looks like they will have exactly that. Maybe a little bit deep, but Wuschel trying to keep it around the outside. Randomly respecting it and backing out, not able to keep to the inside, and once again we go through 2 of doing, and the line astern as newbies trying to look for a gap as well. So Randomly needs to make this move, but they need to make it safely without opening themselves up, because they have not 1, not 2, but 3 cars trailing behind that are more than willing to take that position at a moment's notice, and Wuschel just hanging on for dear life as we traverse through turn 6 once more.
Yep, some really nice defense and driving there from Wuschel. Radomi saw the opportunity, went for it, but thought better of it at the end. Definitely some smart driving going on here. No big silly moves that don't need to happen. Yeah, just good racing all around.
And we're only 15 minutes into this race. It is worth noting, so you aren't going to see any of these drivers going for kind of one-and-done championship-winning moves just yet. This is the time to evaluate what's going on. Just limit the time loss that you're going to have in the early phase of the race, and make sure that you kind of get things under control. But try telling that to Randomy when you're that car behind and you see the damage every single corner that you get close to that Porsche. You see how much it's struggling through the corners, and you know you're losing time. It's very hard to just take that decision to just back it down a little bit, but it looks like Randomy might have that clarity of mind to just keep things calm and just survive the race for right now. Currently 5 seconds up the road or behind Low Circle is a Wuschel, so this isn't going to be a battle where you're trying to get through and then immediately up to the next car. This probably is going to be your only battle for quite a while, even if you do get past. So take your time and do it safe. Put any damage on that car that might cost you some future positions.
Yep, as we see, Wuschel definitely seems to have maybe caught her composure a little bit. That was, just nice lines. Even with that damage, isn't taking, the car's not running too wide. It's not sliding out of the corners. So yeah, just maybe take a few laps forward to get up into the rhythm again, and with that damage.
Certainly. That could play a big part in tire wear, though, for the Porsche. We'll have to look long term what happens with that. But Porsche normally taking good control of those rear tires. So maybe might even balance out the car as we see a little bit of a wash of understeer and transitioning to, I believe, an incident here. Looks like Oraz and MNU underscore going through another battle side by side as Oraz as we make that run down to turn 12 into the inside. Well, held by MNU, but the curb just unsettling the car and a tank slapper back into Oraz, the innocent victim there. And I mean, nothing Oraz could do. The car basically trapped to the inside, and not even the gravel, I think, would have saved them there.
Yep, that's a bit unfortunate. That's just a passenger ride that you didn't buy a ticket for. So yeah, it looks like Oraz maybe caught a little bit of damage from that, and MNU underscore just kind of, that's it for him probably. That's just last and a lot of damage to go with it.
Turned around, long time to recover. Perhaps looking at that pit window to open in the next 3 minutes or so. Just a reminder, for that pit window opens up 20 minutes after the start of the race and is open for 20 minutes. In that, you need to make a mandatory tire change. No requirement for fuel, but most of these drivers will realistically carry about half their tank for the start of the race and half after. Maybe some variations for some strategy depending on what you think you need to do. But it might be time for MNU to come into the pits, just get that clean air, because even if you push all the ways up to Oraz, you're going to get some of that dirty air. Just get some time to hot lap, pull yourself back up, and especially with Wushel being the cork in the bottle here, you might even find yourself maybe a bit of a stretch, but able to slingshot up into P5 if you're able to put those laps down and they battle hard enough. Up here in a big slide from Wushel, well held from the number 69, and that could have very quickly gotten out of hand.
Yep, I think we're going to see Wushel in as soon as the pit window opens. That car, it's obviously just not handling right. It needs to be fixed, regardless of how much it takes. I would take it. I would take the damage of the repairs, and then just try and put in some hot laps afterwards to try and negate that.
Yeah, it looks like the rear end really just not wanting to stick. That Porsche just biting at every opportunity that it can as Ranamy just pulling up to the rear end of that 992 and just pushing it through the corners, really, just trying to find any opportunity. Unfortunately, the most recent time, Ranamy had just fallen just a little bit too far back to take advantage. Another driver trying to take advantage while the Lexus and the Aston Martin are going at it as we tuck ourselves through 4 and 5 and going down into 6 as we see our top speed king of that Lexus RCF currently being pushed by the Aston Martin of Blade Wolf, as well as Anka, who has fallen down the order after their excursion with Wushel, just trying to find something around here. But and 2 cars worth of dirty air, that Ferrari is going to really struggle to get anything going, especially with the front end damage after their contact early on. But it looks like the 142 trying to push the Lexus, maybe a little bit of mind games pushing that Lexus wide, taking half a look, wanting to get to the inside of 12, but this isn't heavy enough of a braking zone to make anything happen, and that Lexus is going to survive for 1 corner more. And once again, onto that straight. Well, we know where that Lexus is king, and this is its home turf. Open up that throttle, that V8 singing as we go down and wide for the 9th place Aston Martin. That could be a track limits warning, but that also could be an opportunity for Anka here, right underneath the rear wing as we see them peel out to the inside of turn 1. Remember, front end damage on Anka, and they think better of it, taking that into account and letting Blade have the apex of 1. Possibly just trying to do a little bit of damage limitation here is of their own, because that Ferrari is not going to be sticking in adverse conditions.
Yep, Blade doing the smart thing there and staying behind the fast Lexus in a straight line. 255 kilometers is the top speed of that Lexus at this track, which is about 7 kilometers an hour faster than any of the Ferraris. So yeah, it doesn't look like the Ferraris are going to get past anytime soon, as well as the Aston Martin. The top speed was 249, so 6 kilometers of difference there. So yeah, Tipping Sauce definitely going to hold these 2 up for a bit around the corners while he blasts away on the straights.
That's absolutely insane. 255 miles or kilometers an hour, miles an hour. That'd be even further insane. But that rocket ship down the straight. Only really one other car that's breaking 250 miles an hour on its own, and that being the BMW, who are pushing 251 and 253. The Aston Martin did get it on that lap, but you'd have to imagine a little bit of assistance as Wuschel going into turn 14 and Randomy possibly finally getting that move to stick. And yeah, Wuschel, as we expected, as soon as that pit window opened, diving into the pits, the rear end of that car, absolutely screaming for help. Well, wait no longer because help has arrived. But who else has arrived? It has Slow Circle on this battle with Luna. The Porsche just trying to put on a stout defense for this prancing horse behind, hanging on to that podium. Well, we've seen one Porsche versus Ferrari battle already. We saw it end in tears, but a big little wiggle for that number 8 Porsche, just trying to plant that power down, and you'd start to be thinking, even with that rear engine layout, maybe the traction isn't enough for these machines, for these Stuttgart-based machines to just squeeze it through the corners, because there's been a lot of oversteer, and Luna's even on a healthy car. That Porsche's starting to move around a little bit more than you would like.
Yep, definitely seems like having a little bit of oversteer issues at the moment. Maybe the pressures are a little bit too high on the rear. Maybe they're overheating. That could definitely be a possibility. Although the temperatures aren't too brilliant or too high here at the moment. Their track temperature's 22, matching the air temperature. So yeah, maybe they're even cold. Maybe that's the opposite. The opposite problem is that they're cold, and that's inducing some oversteer.
I've experienced some warm-up issues in trying to set up this car before, so if you aren't getting enough sidewall flex in that tire, enough working of that rubber, you might not be getting any performance out of those tires. But the performance is stuck on the straight for that Ferrari, as we see it starting to try to get a move around the inside of one. Luna trying to stick it around the outside, leaving a little bit of space, but clearing the nose of Circle as we tip it into one, looking to the inside of two for doing, and it looks like half a move. Luna being smart about it, able to get it tucked into the apex and through 3 and 4. Just line astern, the dirty air fighting that as you tip each corner, setting up the next, thinking one step ahead of the track ahead of you. And this 58 Ferrari has that Circle just trying to pull a little bit closer. We see that straight line advantage that the Ferraris have over the Porsche here, but they just don't seem to be able to get close enough in these medium speed corners. They just get pushed back a little bit too far to be able to send a move on the end of that main straight.
Yep, well, you say that the Porsches are kind of pretty much the same as the Ferraris in top speed, but I forgot what I was going to say now. Don't you just hate it when that happens? I haven't got a clue what I was going to say.
Just taking the words right out of your mouth and throwing them in the bin. Yeah, it is very interesting to look at that these Ferraris are struggling on the straight. One thing to note, I know Anka has damage, but while falling behind this Lexus, it's only gained 1 kilometer an hour on the straightaway. So maybe the fact that it is such an efficient machine, a big wiggle from Anka, that's going to push them way back. As I was saying, though, maybe the fact that it's such an efficient car in terms of aero might be hurting it in terms of what it gains from the slipstream. And it's maybe not getting as much from the draft as some of the other cars might. Not lifting as much air off of the car and not pushing through. I would not educated enough to say on that. Just purely speculation, but Anka deciding they've had enough to sitting behind that Lexus. They think they have the pace to get past, and they've dipped into those pits early and are going to take that suffering later in the race. Well, that suffering is still going on for Circle as they try to push through the dirty air kicked up from the rear wing and diffuser of the number 8 Porsche, going a little bit wide through 6. And that's another wiggle. And once again, seeing these Porsches struggling on that rear end and just unable to put the power down how they would like in the mid-corner. That's just letting these Ferraris creep up, which seem to be honestly one of the most stable machines I think I've ever seen in GT3 racing, especially with how consistent it is. And as soon as I say that, a commentator's curse of Ferrari is in the gravel trap. That is MNU underscore the number 21 going wide in turn 4. I'd have to imagine maybe too much curb in 3 just unsettling the car. I mean, that's a weird place to go off.
Yep, I thought we actually had used up all our commentator curses last week, but yeah, it just carries a little bit too much speed in. The back end just says, nope, no thank you, not today, and see you later.
Yeah, we see the Marshal in the back quick to deploy the yellow, and MNU back on track immediately after. MNU, remember one of those cars that got caught up with damage earlier in the race, perhaps carrying that through as well. So unsure. Obviously, we'll become educated about after the race. Nothing that we can really get. We can't talk to these drivers while they're on track. They might be a little bit unhappy if we disturb them into that scenario, especially if they're not having the best race. I can't imagine that would go well with most of the grid. But well, the rest of the grid here, Blade Wolf starting to push Anka, who has gotten past the Aston Martin here, but is now deep into the corner. I believe Anka pitted one lap earlier, so Blade Wolf just trying to get those tires up to temperature, able to sneak in front. And yeah, you can see the front end of that Aston Martin is refusing to comply as Benak immediately behind in the number 54, putting pressure to possibly lap these cars. Bear in mind, the leader has not hit as well as Suzuka and Luna Randomy and Dipping Sauce behind. So still pit cycle to be done. Quite a long pit lane here at Valencia as it goes down the entirety of the main straight. But Benak starting to make their presence known, starting to stretch those legs as that gap. You can see there that second car in frame at the end. Suzuka just trying to hang on. Maybe licking their chops as well here. The dirty air might start pushing Benak back towards them. These blue flags stay as advisory, and these drivers decide to battling it out.
Can we just take a moment to try and understand how Danak has caught uh, the back of P11 before even halfway through the race?
I mean, I'd have to guess. It's all the pit cycle, right? The pit just has to be super long. I don't know what the delta is on this track, but I definitely would want to pay attention to that and see. Oh yeah, it does look like a 1 minute 4 pit. So all you'd have to gain is very deep under the brakes goes Denak, able to feed that corner off. As I was saying, about a minute pit lane time for these drivers from start to finish. So all you'd have to do is gain about 30 seconds on the cars behind. It would be pushed right up to their rear wing. But if you're the leader here, what are you thinking? Are you thinking that, hey, get out of my way, I'm the leader, of course, so you want to get past? Or are you thinking it's like, all right, if I'm stuck behind another lap or two, I'm going to dart into the pits? What's the thought process here, especially when you got this pressure coming from behind with Suzuka, only 2 seconds back?
For me, I would probably be like, right, I'm stuck behind these guys who've just pitted. It's probably the right time now to pit, as Suzuka does just that. He wasn't going to wait too much longer to see how that unfolded for Denak. But yes, I didn't realize actually that Blade had pitted, so that explains why Denak just goes a little bit wide actually in turn 1. So maybe picked up a warning there. But yeah, it's odd because these guys aren't really obliged to get out of the way. They are and they aren't. Don't defend if the pace is there. The car behind, but they don't have to jump out of the way. They can race their race, and it's up to the guy behind to try and get past safely.
Yeah, but I mean, one thing to note too is this gap hasn't really closed back up since Denak's caught that dirty air. It's stayed pretty consistent, even with Blade having a couple little bit of mistakes coming through. It's so maybe that Ferrari struggling in dirty air. Denak, it looked like it was pretty lively just watching the body language through the first couple of corners, and it does look very pointed coming through turn 8 there. It's be very interesting to see how this plays out, especially Suzuka having pit early and gonna have on hot tires once Denak comes into the pits. I'm struggling to see why you would stay out here for much longer, because even if you get past Blade, you have 2 more cars immediately up the road that are going to be causing just as much of an issue, if not more, because they're even tighter or even more tightly packed, and they aren't going to just want to give up their battle just because you're getting a silly flag waved at them.
No,
and there it is.
Right, as he does indeed, he calls it a day and comes in. So yeah, this is probably not going to be too close between Suzuka and Denak, but depends on Suzuka's outlap, just how much they're going to come close together. Just trying to see on the timing screens what Suzuka's outlap is going to be looking like.
It is important though how good you stop in your box. We see a delta so far of 1 minute 1, all the ways up to 1 minute 8 for bad stops. So there's a possible 7-second delta if you get your pit stop right and you get it wrong, or even forgetting to turn the car back on. I don't know who has experience with that, but this car doesn't want to launch. So it is a very crucial part of the race, even though you are pushing at a very low speed and you're sitting at 50 Ks and just banging off of the red limiter, it doesn't feel like you're going to be under much pressure. Well, it's probably one of the most important phases of the race because you're at such a low speed. So you see Denak right at the end of the pit lane, right behind that 50-meter board car
going to be closer.
And it looks like Suzuka's got the run. Remember,
No.
coming out of the pit lane here, they're going to be stuck on the outside line. Suzuka's going to be, a little bit wide, maybe fixating on that car directly ahead. But Denak's now on cold tires, and Suzuka is on the hot rubber and right up under the rear wing, maybe just, a second back from the number 54. So this could be the exact window that they're looking for. Denak's going to be struggling a little bit, but I think it's going to be a little bit of now or never. While that number 54 tries to get those tire temperatures up, you need to push, get under that rear wing, cause a mistake, cause them to push past that limit of tires, and maybe they'll even damage their tires for later in the race. If you don't get it now, you at least have an opportunity to do it later.
Yep, that was nearly a second gain from Suzuka by doing the undercut there. So the undercut does seem to be quite powerful. You get out into fresh air with the tires getting up nice and hot, and that gives you the advantage of the guy who hasn't yet pitted. I think if Denak had left out another lap, Suzuka would have been passed.
Absolutely, especially with the dirty air having pushed Denak back. Can't imagine losing time, or would have having lost words. Hello, they are not here today. Likely would have lost time to Blade Wolf if they decided to go for a dive and try to stick their nose somewhere that maybe to Blade they might have felt that it didn't belong. That would have been more time lost going for a little bit of side by side and just offline. Then of course you have to get the car built back up to speed. Well, Suzuka's already well up to speed, pushing that gap now underneath a second. The dirty air is going to be starting to play a factor at this range. 0.8 seconds. Suzuka does still have the better tires. I'd say maybe another lap or two before we see that number 54 really up to snuff with the grip in those tires. And the 10 is pushing everything it can out of those new boots. And it's going to be very, very close by the end of next lap if they're able to put themselves within striking range. And I think it might be leaning on a Denak mistake right now.
Yep, Suzuka just doesn't seem to be able to have the pace to pull up behind Denak and go for an attack. So yeah, definitely hoping for something on Denak's end. Maybe even a track limits violation that'll put the drive-through onto the car. But yeah, no, I don't think there's any moves happening here anytime soon.
It wouldn't be the first time that Denak would have been struggling with track limits. Think Hungaroring in their first race in the AM Championship when they were working towards their promotion up to this Silver Championship, actually. And they lost the race on the last lap. I believe it was 4 corners from the end. They got their final track limits warning. So, I mean, never say never. And especially with this pressure coming in from the number 10, you don't have a chance to take a breather. You have to be pushing on. And at a track like this where the track limits are so threatening, they're always looming over you, especially that exit of turn 2, exit of turn 6. Very, very easy to just push it that little bit too wide. And you're playing with fire. And that's the big advantage that Suzuka has here is being able to control that pace that Denak runs and not letting them kind of back things down and kind of just settle into a comfortable pace. They're forcing that 54 to continue to stretch those track limits as much as it can to just try to find that last little bit of pace. And all it takes, single wiggle, stay in the throttle. There's your track limits warning. Do that 3 more times and you have a penalty. So number 10 still has plenty to play for, but maybe it's not going to be a direct on-track battle.
Yep, I'm just actually looking there. Suzuka, even though they're in the slipstream of Denak, is 1 kilometer down on Denak's best top speed. So I think Denak's maybe trimmed a little bit of aero out of that thing to give it a little bit better punch on the straight. Just interesting as well. Suzuka was 2 seconds quicker in their stop to Denak, according to the times I have here.
Perhaps maybe that undercut wasn't as powerful, at least in terms of that first outlap. But I mean, that is quite a substantial margin considering they pit with about a 2.1 second gap, if I recall correctly. But another gap that's closed up. Honka versus Wushel again. Wushel having taken that hit from Anka earlier in the race. Well, now it is the rematch. So you're going to see the number 69 probably play a little bit of defensive tactics. I don't see where there's going to be much more gain for either of these cars. So expect to see some no-holds-barred action as the 40's trying to pressure the 69 here. As we tip through 12, just seeing that Ferrari bounce around, it's so frightening, especially being a Porsche driver, knowing that a single wrong bounce can be the end of your race. But those Ferraris they just accept everything that gets thrown at them, it seems.
Yeah, definitely seems like a more compliant car on the suspension side of things. It looks hairy, but it doesn't feel hairy in the car. You're just like, oh, what was that? Never mind, carry on.
You can have an earthquake that marks a 9 on the Richter scale, and the car just feels like another little speed bump. So it does seem to be a bit of an advantage being able to just abuse those track limits a little bit more, especially like the inside of 3 here, just tighten things up a little bit more, as well as maybe the inside of 4. And yeah, you can see exactly that. Anka just taking a little bit of that inside curb, cheating at it, and just nibbling a little bit more than that Porsche can, who can just has to avoid it. Really, I mean, especially with the momentum from the rear engine as nature of that car, if you just lift an inside tire, it tends to pitch and try to give you a really hard snap of oversteer that's rather hard to correct. So it's going to be advantage Anka in that part of the game, but Wuschel, track position, and that's a big advantage on a track like this.
Yep, definitely gonna have to be a bit braver on the brakes here for Anka to try and get past Wuschel. It looks like they both have fixed their damage in their cars, so this is an outright race. No damage to complain about, no tires to complain about. They've just got fresh tires, and that should be them to the end. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
It looks like Anka just trying to push things a little bit wider. Ooh, maybe a little bit of a slide there, just watching the body language of that car, but still able to carry very good momentum on the exit there. Is that Ferrari, such is the compliance that you can get drift through the corner and still make it. So you see Randomie trying to come out of the pit, and it looks like they're going to be under assault from the number 17 newbie, who's been out for quite a while now, and Randomie just hanging around the outside of 2, and we tip it into 3. The left becomes the right, but newbie able to get in front, and Randomie, those cold tires just not up to snuff, and that's newbie moving up 1 more position in the P5. We talked about the charge going up the field. Well, newbie will another position gained, another position earned. Now they're going to be under attack from the fresh tires of Randomie, and next 22 minutes are going to be an assault for that number 17. As we see the inside opened up for Anka, just trying to sneak underneath the Porsche, just trying to carry that momentum. Anka very deep under the brakes, and Wuschel just trying to hang it around the outside, but too long of a corner. Anka slithering up that inside, and position gain. Wuschel needed to fall back in line, and unfortunately concede what I believe just Anka's superior pace in that Ferrari, and not much that you can do. I think it was more inevitable than anything.
Yep, I think well played there from Anka, opening the door into that corner. I can't remember what he calls it. Afición, maybe? Curve Afición, the one before that, one after that, I'm not too sure. This track needs better corner names. But yeah, Anka, yeah, just kind of plays the car where it needed to be placed. And Wuschel, I think maybe a little bit kind to Anka there, at least more than I would have been coming up to that corner.
Yeah, possibly just try to survive the race, maybe thinking about the championship. But Wuschel's worst result to date being a P7 at Donington, our season opener. This might end up defaulting down to their drop round. So you'd imagine this would be, all right, you have a poor result, maybe do or die, and just see what you can get. At that point, you weren't going to be fighting for anything lower than you haven't already achieved, and looks like playing the long game with 1 round left to go. But the long game is not to be played here, as Randomie starting to get those tires in their window, starting to push that BMW just that little bit harder. And newbie is starting to probably feel that pressure as those older tires are going to start to fall apart throughout the later phase of this race. Just taking a look here, looking like newbie has been on those tires for 15 minutes, almost since the pit window opened. Obviously, this is Randomie's second lap out on those tires, so very, very big tire delta here. Newbie is going to have a monumentous task to just try to hang on to that P5, let alone sneak another position down the order. Randomie. Oh, big slide coming on the exit of 14, and that's going to be all that momentum lost as the pit window closed. I believe all of our drivers have been into that some point. Just checking my timetable. Yeah, it does appear to be so. So everyone has served their military pit stop. Will be toward the end of the race, but maybe going a little bit deep and just the new rubber randomly just making it so easy to get that car into the corner. Maybe he's really trying to fight to get that BMW to work in and then just continue that rotation. There's always entry, understeer, and able to finally get it to bite later on. But at that point, you've let off so much speed that the car behind you is just able to leak out that little bit more.
Yep. Definitely seems to be the Ferrari definitely has the, as we see a big dive on the brakes, close up a bit of car length there on the newbie. Maybe trying to squeeze the inside there, but doesn't quite work. Definitely newbie's going to start driving those mirrors here, otherwise Randomi's going to get past pretty quickly.
Do you think Newbie got a little bit spooked there too? It's all release of the brakes and then back onto the lights. It did appear into 8 there. Ooh, a big bounce coming in from the 17, and it looks like the suspension able to absorb that. And it's deep into the 13, and no, that's just deep.
What happened there?
I'd have to guess a mechanical for just completely straight. I didn't see any contact there.
No, definitely no contact there, as we don't go just quite far enough back, unfortunately, to see that. But definitely, to me, it looked like the car just completely straightened out for no reason. It could be maybe a glitch in the hardware. But yeah, that's, well, 3 positions lost now for newbies. It was looking like a good run. 5th would have been a decent enough result there for newbie, but I think it's going to be hard to recover from there now.
Yeah, that's going to be a very big or very tall order to try to recover from. Wushel, it is a target for newbie, but I don't think that he's going to be able to close up on her. It's old tires, both of them. Yes, pit as soon as that pit window opened, but I mean, the dirty air is proven to be a challenge for most of these drivers as we see the battle continuing for Luna and Sergel, just unable to make a move past that. Porsche just keeping enough momentum to keep that Ferrari behind for the final step on the podium. And Sergel, frustration likely building here as we eke into the final 15 minutes soon. About one more lap until we cross that barrier. Soon you have to imagine that there's going to start being some sense, just trying to make a move happen, roll a little bit more speed through the corner. So you see that Ferrari close up a little bit on the straightaway, but once again, way too far back to really make a challenge. But Luna wide there. So once again, Sergel, again, more compliant car, that Ferrari. So that Porsche seems to be wrestled just that much more in Valencia, kind of exposing some mid-corner struggles that are coming out of that 992.
Yep, it's getting a wee bit lighter on fuel at the front, so yeah, I think it's just getting to that point in every Porsche's life in a race where it just doesn't like driving anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely could see it as another little bit of a wiggle there, just movement, no big slide coming in from Luna, so keeping that momentum quite well as we jump out of 6 through the Curva Official and into Bernat Martinez. To basically talking like an autobiography at this point, or some kind of documentary with these quarter names. But once again, that Porsche just hanging on a little bit mid-corner, momentum just able to build it out, and then that drive off the corner, able to put that traction down with the flat 6, just benefiting it a little bit more than the Ferrari, but I think we're a little bit closer than we have been before. Sergel just trying to carry that momentum very wide in 13, straighten up that braking zone, trying to get on power early as we see Luna go a little bit deeper and Sergel a little bit more patient, trying to really utilize the exit speed of that Ferrari, take some of that draft, but just unable to close up enough. Gap staying around 0.4 of a second, and it will stick there into turn 1. And once again, another tour of the track we go, just trying to get as close as possible. And that Porsche just doing just enough to keep in front of the number 58.
Yep, you can see Luna's lines there into turn 2 at least. Just sort of pointing the car towards the corner a little bit earlier and getting onto the brakes so it closes that gap. Not something you're going to want to stick your car in if you're or circle, excuse me. Yeah, I completely forgot what I was going to say again. Today is not going well. Too tired.
You'd have to imagine that you need to start playing some mind games here as Sergal, maybe giving half a look to the inside of a corner, just freak them out a little bit as you see, yeah, Luna just having to straight line that, braking a little bit more. The front end of the Porsche just not very compliant, where Sergal's really able to kind of loop the car in, have a lot of angular braking, and get rotation through the entry phase rather than having to kind of point and shoot the car, more or less, is what I'm seeing with that number 8 up ahead. Ooh, maybe a little bit weak coming through turn 12. This could be Sergal coming around with the momentum in 13. Luna might have to hold it tight here, unable to eke all the way to the outside of the track. This could be the run that Sergal needed, and that run coming down onto the straight, deep into the slipstream. I struggle to see where that Ferrari is getting any kind of run. The Porsche's bottom end just really able to stretch that gap just enough, so the Ferrari just can't get on top of it.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting because Sergal. I keep getting Boomy and Sergal mixed up. Sergal actually has a little bit of a top speed advantage over Luna. So yeah, that's definitely using the Porsche's advantage there to keep Sergal behind him.
You'd have to imagine. I mean, the Ferrari doesn't seem bad at putting down power, maybe just lacking a little bit of low-end torque. Maybe the front end of the car just struggling to get into the corner, having to slow down that little bit extra and not really able to carry what Sergal would want into that final corner, into that heavy braking. It is relatively tricky. Downhill starts to go off camber as you turn in, kind of braking zone. Could be the fact that it's so front limited that Ferrari's just not agreeing and unable to carry that momentum through that final corner as we go deep into the hairpin. Sergal trying to maybe go for a cutback and keep that momentum, but that's going to be a little bit of a gap opened up for Luna, who is not really phased by that deep moment for Sergal, but a couple more corners once again, and that Ferrari just seems right back onto the rear end of the Porsche. No breather allowed for the number 8, and I'm really struggling to see where Sergal's going to get past here without trying to force the issue.
Yep, it just seems like Luna's just putting the car where it needs to be. Nice defensive driving. Sergal's going to have to pull out a rabbit from the hat here to try and get past them. And without, of course, just flying straight through them off the track.
And you can see how much later that Ferrari is able to feed itself in and still get that front end compliance. Once again, Luna having to straight line the braking, but you'd think even coming into like here into turn 4, just maybe half a look, just push them a little bit wide coming into 5, get that momentum coming in, get a little bit tighter, so that way your momentum advantage that you carry through 6 here is a little bit more beneficial. So you see, yeah, look at how early that Ferrari can get on the power, but then the Porsche just putting the power down and just driving away under the low end, and that Ferrari can't do anything unless it draws alongside right away.
Yeah, you're gonna have to just poke the nose up the inside, put Luna offline. That's the only way it's gonna work. You're not gonna force an error by just following the same lines all the time. You see Luna just dipping the car in a little bit earlier out of the corner. Nice defensive driving there.
And once again, I mean, look at even the wider entry, the Ferrari getting on power earlier. It's just the low-end torque of that Porsche, but the bump's not doing any favors as Sergal wants to look inside, having to move to the outside, but Luna very defensive, very early on power to get that run, but once again, the Porsche just driving away under the low end, and the Ferrari can't do anything, matching its top end, but the Porsche just pulls such a big gap on that initial application of power that there's nothing the Ferrari can do. It doesn't even look like it's a traction issue. There's just not enough grunt in that turbo V6 to get it out of the corner.
Yeah, it's interesting to see the differences, and of course the Porsche does not have any turbos, so maybe it's just a bit of a turbo lag issue on the Ferrari because they both have the exact same amount of cylinders, so it's not a displacement issue. Sergal's just maybe just pushing it a little bit too hard now. Doesn't seem to be quite on the back end of Luna as he was the lap before. So gonna have to just dummy it or make it look like you're going to send it, but you don't. It's just going to be one of those moves.
Perhaps chewing up those front tires as well. We know the Ferrari, looking back at our original rounds in this championship, round 1 and 2 specifically, it's bound to chew up its tires maybe a little bit more than the others. Of course, in Donington, that came from the curbing, maybe causing slow punctures and kind of dislodging the beat of those tires as we get a little bit wide. A big wiggle for Luna, able to keep it straight, as it looks like Sergel might have had a similar issue, if not worse, with some understeer on the inside of turn 12's curbing, and that's going to be the gap just kind of stagnating once again. But that was Sergel's opportunity, pushing Luna into a mistake like that, but they were too far away to capitalize. That's where you need to be right underneath in that 4/10, that 3/10 gap, just to really abuse any mistake that they make like that. But unfortunately, too far and too little too late in that circumstance.
Yep, it looked like a little bit of understeer carried by Serval into that corner, and then that kind of gave Luna a free pass for that mistake they made. So just need to tighten up the driving a little bit more. Just knock out any of the mistakes. Follow your own line. Don't worry about the car ahead, and the position will come to you.
It's a very tricky thing to do. It would be looking through the other car, but when you look through to our lead battle, is Denak actually a little bit of a squirm there, perhaps some warning signs in the last 8 minutes of this race. The Suzuka's kind of held that gap at 1 second. We saw them get pushed back due to the dirty air. Well, they seem quite comfortable sitting at that 1 second gap right now, and Denak may be cracking a little bit under the pressure. A little narrow on the entry there. This could be a chance for Suzuka to gain a little bit of time, but actually it looks like Denak might have been able to nail a better run on the corner exit, and is continuing to stretch their legs on this main straight. But I'm not sure, maybe just the uncharacteristic mistake from Denak, and maybe some warning signs as we head into the last 7 minutes of this race.
Yep, I'm just keeping an eye on another screen between the race between Slow Circle and Luna. They got a little bit close there towards the end of the lap, but again, just out of that final corner, the Porsche just has the legs to stretch out the gap just enough so that, the Ferrari can't really do anything about it.
Yeah, it's a big struggle for these Ferraris to really make any kind of passing happen. It does seem to be lifting off that little bit of extra front aero that just takes the edge off of those cars. Denak has been doing well in that clean air, proving that the Ferrari has the pace. So can't be saying that it doesn't have a race-winning car underneath all of our Ferrari drivers here, but maybe Sergel looking up the inside in the 6. And no, a little bit too little too late. Luna thinks better of it, able to carry that momentum, and that's going to stretch the gap a little bit. That Porsche is able to put down that power way earlier than that Ferrari on that tight line. We already know the benefit that Porsche's had on corner exit, immediately putting that power down. Sergel once again needing to claw that time back just to get another opportunity. At some point, you're going to have to move the car in front. You obviously don't want to drive into them, pick up any kind of penalty, but you need to make Luna kind of respect, because at this point, Luna's kind of ignoring every move that comes in. Eventually, you need to put a nose in and kind of force them offline. Maybe, again, not hit them, but Luna's definitely playing it very, very smart. So be a little bit more aggressive if Sergel is going to make anything happen here without a mistake. Yep,
it just kind of seems like Sergel spends the whole lap closing the gap that Luna creates on this straight. It's just twos and fro's between the both of them. So Sergel looking a little bit better in the midfield and the more technical part, and then Luna just has a bit more low down torque to get that Porsche out of the corners.
And it's every single lap too. And the only real opportunity that we would see outside of that main straight coming from 6 to 8. I mean, the Porsche once again just has enough compliance to get the drive out of there every single time. Maybe Sergel unable to get the power down as early as he would like, and that end up actually hurting him in the long run. So we look in the rear view, look how much nicer the Ferrari gets into the corner, but then we just know the engine difference between the two cars. But that gap is starting to close. Sergel maybe just pulling in that little bit closer. 5 minutes to go here. Maybe the tires start falling away from Luna too. There's all sorts and manners of things that could be going wrong here. Worth noting that Luna is on 27-minute-old tires. So actually, the newer tires, the Circle's on 28-minute-old tires. So 1 lap separating the two of them. I mean, it's hard to look at this and say that Circle doesn't have the pace advantage here. It is just purely Luna being that cork in the bottle and using the engine power, low-end torque to drive it out of the final corner and hang on to this final step of the podium.
Yep, it's a nice battle, but I think Circle's gonna have to dig deep and pull something out of the bag here. It just at the moment just don't seem to be pushing up as much as they need to be to try and make this pass happen. And maybe they are starting to feel a little bit of grain on the front, maybe a little bit of pressure loss, or the carcass is starting to cool down because it hasn't got as much tread left on the tires. You don't know, but yeah, it's gonna have to happen pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, that gap is starting to close down as Circle's able to put down some good corners, but with 6 seconds behind, you have the gap to start making some aggressive moves, but you need to get close enough in the last couple minutes here because you are running out of time. 5/10, it's a good gap, but it's not close enough as we've seen 4/10, and it stays stagnant the entire straight. So Circle really needing to reach deep into their pocket and use whatever they have left in their bag of tricks to roll into 8 for one more time here. Luna just leading the Ferrari once again. And the downforce advantage that Ferrari seems to have is obvious, but could you imagine if that was trimmed out, that front end still going into the corner the same, but having the pace to match this Porsche on the straightaway and really kind of expose it out of that final corner as we see a big bobble from both of the cars here. I struggle to see where Luna
This could be it. This could be it.
Very, very tight coming into the corner. Circle on power before the Porsche here. But once again, the Porsche starting to stretch its legs a little bit more, but I think Circle might still have a slight run coming into turn 1 here, but it's not going to be enough. So once again, we have to wait. And once again,
it's Luna.
Fly from Luna, and that's going to open up the door for Circle coming into turn 2 of doing. That's going to open a little bit of contact, little tap, and Luna, I think maybe just moving the front end a little bit too much and having to back out there. Concede that position to Circle. A long fought battle. I mean, we talked about Circle needing a mistake. That pressure was building for, 30 minutes or more. So eventually, it finally cracked through. And, patience is a virtue, that's for certain.
Yep. You see, Luna just takes a little bit too much AstroTurf on the outside. Back end goes a little bit squirrely, and then Circle does get it back, but Luna goes for. I don't know whether I call that a die. That was fair game. That was a good move, and I think maybe Luna just thought that maybe they were in the wrong there and gave the position to Circle the end of it. But yeah, that move looked fine to me. That didn't look like anything I think the stewards would have taken any exception to.
Yeah, it looked like there's a bit of hard GT racing. I don't think there was much issue. Maybe a little bit deep, and I think Luna, like you said, probably felt like they were the cause of that contact. And I can see how they could think that in the cockpit, but all's fair game. Both cars were continuing to go straight. A little bit desperate to try to hang on there last second. But I think Circle now definitely going to be starting to stretch that gap. We saw how much stronger they were through the middle sector here. I'd be surprised if Luna in the next lap and a half here, as we enter the final minute of the race, is able to close that gap back up, barring any kind of Circle mistake. It definitely seems a bit far-fetched for anything like that.
Stranger things have happened.
Certainly, yeah. It's not over until the fat lady sings. That's for certain, as we see Denek coming through the hairpin, chased quickly by Suzuka, but that gap stretching out to about 2.5 seconds. Perhaps the dirty air wrecking havoc on the front tires of that Paliku'i Ferrari, just unable to put that power down as early as they would like, losing that front end, causing that understeer, having to just wait for that car to rotate. But tip it over, 30 seconds left coming out of the final corner. This will be the final lap. Leader will see the white flag here, and you'd be hard pressed to say that Denek has not earned this, being put under pressure from Suzuka. But we talked about it once again. Not over till it's over. Denek still does have to complete this final tour. We've seen races multiple times now be decided on that final lap. whether it be by incident or by battle. And so the final tour is going to be led by the 54 here through turn 3, tip into 4, kind of a roller coaster into that compression, drive it out, open it up for 5, and you get into the technical sector. Really wait for the tires as they're going to be screaming towards the end of their fuel stint here and just asking for any kind of help that you can give it, but still have half the track to go. From 7, not really a turn, but setting yourself for 8. Dive it in. Denak, one final time. Going to be heavy on the brakes into turn 11. I'd struggle at this point on, minus an issue through turn 12 to see Denak not bring this home. And it has been a fantastic race from the number 54. Lights the flag, as we've seen be quite characteristics of Denak once they've been on the pace and been really comfortable with the track. And there's been no looking back. There was a small period where Suzuka was able to put them under pressure. But as we look forward to our final round, Denak looks forward to see that checkered flag for the second time this season to take the win in round 5 of the Simufur Silver Championship, followed up by Suzuka taking that P2. As we look back, a 25-second gap all the way back to P3, such as the time that was lost in that battle. As Sergel is just now making their way through the final corner. Or pulling Luna along, and that P4 very wide there. That could be a track limit. I don't see anything popping up. So Sergel bringing home that P5 on, or P3 on the track. I think he'd be very disappointed if it was suddenly a P5. Followed up by Luna Branaby, of course, in P4 and 5. And then Anka back in a yellow flag for... Is Anka out of fuel? Anka, no, please don't do the Anka. Okay.
Good sportsmanship there from Michelle not to take that position on the line. It did look like Anka had run out of fuel.
It definitely does look like it. Then maybe just a little pulse of throttle at the end there. And then Dipping Sauce filling out that top 10. Chased very quickly behind by Orez, only half a second back, pushing them all the way to the end of the line. So must have been catching them right at the end of the race while we were taking a look at that top group. But what an interesting race. Definitely a battle of patience for many of these drivers. Definitely a test of many of our drivers' mettle and how willing you were to put everything on the table. We saw some few mistakes come out. Many of our drivers struggling with damage or maybe even tire issues, but certainly one of the more interesting races to watch. Not the most on-track action, more of a strategic battle for most of our drivers as we see Denak and Suzuka. A little bit of donuts on the exit of one of the turns. I believe that is the hairpin, actually. They filled out that podium. So congrats to our podium sitters. Of course, Denak once again followed by Suzuka and Sergel. Then Luna and Ranami filing out that top 5. Anka and Wushel followed by Newbie, Blade, and Dipping filling out that top 10. And then, of course, Orez and MNU underscore filling out those final 2 positions on the grid as we take that final tour through our grid. And any closing thoughts about that race? An interesting race at Valencia. We expected it to be a little bit more processional, but there's certainly some things to look out for future races.
Yep, I think it did provide some good racing there. Of course, you have the fast sweepers into the hard braking, just kind of makes it difficult to actually set up a pass. But the guys gave it a good shot, and unfortunately, other than a couple of incidents, it did seem like a pretty good race from our end, at least.
I would have to be obliged to agree. So certainly a strong victory once again. Lights the flag from Denak, and I believe with those results, they might be retaking the championship by 1 point. They've won for the whole position. 11-point or 12-point gap, but 11 after that. Wushel, it's going to be close. Actually, I think Wushel might hang on to the lead by a point or 2 before it drops. Be curious to see what those points work out to be. Of course, all these results are provisional until they're reviewed by our stewards on Wednesday. Other than that, I think that's about a wrap for round 5. Thank you all for coming out. Of course, if you wish to join us for our Silver Championship or any future championship, of course, we have our Endurance Series that is hosted monthly now, that is run in tandem with this Silver Championship and any other championships that come. Please join us on our Discord. Follow our socials down in the description below. But until then, I am Plasma signing off. Thank you, and have a good night.
Yep. I'll see you next week for the final round of the Silver Championship.